Dutch Air Force survey teams moved through the newly drained land, seeking the twisted wreckage of lost aircraft and the men who flew them. Forgotten victims of a war that lasted too long and claimed too many lives. Of the 150 planes recovered so far by the Dutch Air Force, 60 shattered Allied and German aircraft have been found in the IJsselmeer area. How many remain?
Well, we might find a few, but compared to those many missing, it's only a very little bit. Because you see, quite a lot of those missing aircrew, they came down in the North Sea. And the North Sea is very deep, it will not be drained, and it's really impossible to recover any aircraft from there. So we might find a few, and I sincerely hope we will do, but not all that many, I'm sorry to say.
As the former seabed became solid enough to support man, Gerrit Zwanenburg, chief of the Dutch Air Force recovery team, went to the site of an aircraft wreck. This was the final resting place of an American B-17, which for more than 30 years had lain beneath the waters of the IJsselmeer. Zwanenburg looks for personal items which may reveal the identity of the crew and the aircraft they flew. Here could lie the answers relatives have sought for years.
First thing you do is establish the type of aircraft, and just a tiny piece like this might be enough, because you see there is a part number on it, 129, and the 29 stands for short 29, meaning the short sterling. Also on it is a small factory inspection stamp, and it says here SHB, meaning short and Harlet and Belfast. So this tiny piece tells me that this is a sterling which was built by Short and Harlet and Belfast, meaning again that I can forget all those sterlings which have been built in Rochester or by the Austin factories. You see, it's a process of elimination. Then what you do is look at the ammunition, and this one is from 1942, because on every shell there is the year stamped in. This is a great help because we know from experience that, for instance, ammunition from 1942 has been used from July 1942 up to June 1943. So this gives you the time you have to look for where the aircraft came down. This was a lucky thing again. In actual fact, this was the first aircraft I ever recovered in 1962. And I had found it was a Lancaster from the Royal Air Force. And from my files, I knew she had to come down on the 20th of December 1942. And that aircraft was an aircraft from 97 Squadron. And then I was looking, see, this is part of one of those incendiary bomb containers, and some squadrons had the habit of painting on the equipment of the squadron code letters. And this is OF, and these were the code letters of 97 Squadron. So that was a positive identification. This is again a lucky shot. You see, this was from a Heinkel 115, which was a German float plane, and they were used from Amsterdam seaplane base during the war. And I knew it was a Heinkel 115 float plane from the bits and pieces. You see, I found the floats and several other things indicating to me that it was a Heinkel 115. And then I was lucky finding this number plate, because on this number plate it says here 2218. And that is what the British and Americans would call a seal number. The Germans would call it a werk number. And only one aircraft has this specific number. See, so when I found this little number plate, I knew exactly which particular aircraft it was.
On the 22nd of December 1943, an American B-24 bomber left its base at Shipton, England. It flew to Münster and dropped its bombs. It was hit by ground fire on the way back and plunged into the IJsselmeer. The B-24's wreckage was discovered in 1968, but its recovery could not be planned until 1975. Gerrit Zwanenburg's first task was to wade out to the wreck to seek its identity.
I went there and I found that she was built by Ford. I also found that the markings on the aircraft were outlined in red. And that red outline only appeared on American aircraft in the second half of 1943. So that again gave you a rough indication. Later on, I went back and I found the main dinghy, and on the main dinghy I found the serial number of the aircraft. And that checked out with all the information I already had. She was a Ford-built aircraft, and she came down in December 1943.
As the wreck was in shallow waters, 1,200 meters from the shore, the Dutch Air Force recovery team and the Army engineers built a raised road over the water to where it lay. The Air Force recovery team would soon learn that of the 10 crew who flew the aircraft's last mission, 5 died trapped inside, 4 parachuted to their deaths, and 1 man survived. The dedicated recovery work on this one plane took 4 months of constant labor. Holding back the water with a cofferdam, piece by piece they brought the bomber's tragic history to light. Working in cold and difficult conditions, they pulled from the wreckage objects that would lead to definite identification. The first, a parachute.
Kijk eens, compleet.
Met loodparachute.
And then the remains of those no longer missing, of the 5 who died with their aircraft, eventually to be returned for burial in America at the request of their kin.
Even uitkijken voor hem. Ja, daar we ook beginnen. Die kant verloren. Ja, joh, dat lag allemaal in de boot. Ja, de boot, ja, die ligt nou daar.
Miraculously, 1 man of the 10 aboard survived the crash. He was the co-pilot, Charles Taylor. Charles, the lucky one, returns to the scene for the first time since the crash and recalls what happened after his plane was hit by Hague.
We were losing the oil pressure in number 4 engine, so we had to feather that. And we had lost the prop governor on number 3 engine, so we couldn't get much power out of that. And this one, let's see, something else happened. We lost the supercharger on this one, so we couldn't get any pressure up in the manifold to keep this one working. So we're really flying on about 1 engine. And I guess we got down to about 110 when we finally hit the water. We didn't lower the landing gear. We didn't lower the, I don't remember lowering the flaps, we may have. But we got it down as slow as we could before it hit the water. Then it immediately stopped, filled with water. And then as soon as I got out of the plane, I swam away because I expected it to sink. I expected it to be pulled down. And the plane just stayed there and stayed there. So then I went back up on the wing. Then I got up on the top, and I thought I would get out the life raft. Meanwhile, the brain is not working too well. No. It was kind of cold. So I did get the life raft out, but I didn't have any strength to get in it, so all I did was put my arm over it. And then I passed out, and then the Germans picked me up.
For Charles Taylor, the only survivor, an emotional reunion with a machine that brought him face to face with death that December day in 1943.
Oh. It is a bit battered, isn't it? Yes.
It's that better, Charlie.
Yes. Oh, boy. I didn't think it would be in the soil this much. But it's pretty badly beaten up. Oh, boy. Never expected that.
You're a very lucky man.
Yes. Yes, indeed. 1 out of 10, really. 1 out of 10. Unbelievable.
See, this is here the
top turret.
Top turret,
Yes. There was a hatch.
The hatch.
Got up, yes. Part of the pilot's compartment. Yes.
Every relic had to be carefully removed, washed, and identified. Years of immersion could render unstable bombs, cartridges, or pressurized tanks.
So we hit pretty fast, so I could see why it would buckle like that. Because the water is not so soft.
It's like a great wall at 110 miles an hour.
That's right, it really was. Yes.
Thoughts of his friends, of what the war meant and why he alone should be alive, move with Charles Taylor along the road from the wreck. The morning is freezing cold, just as it was in February 1941. In the second car is John Hall, sergeant gunner in the rear of a Wellington bomber which crashed in that month on the ice-covered Isselmeer. Injured, he was pulled by his mates from the wrecked plane and dragged on a parachute across the ice, captured and imprisoned. A dead comrade remained in the plane. For John Hall, this was also his first return to the site of this crash. Once water and ice covered, now farming land.
Well, this is the spot where we found your aircraft in October 1967.
Oh, that's...
And you see, it's quite a different scenery from the time you came down.
Yes, it certainly is. How thick would the ice be?
Well, it was quite a severe winter in 1940, 1941. I think it should have been 13, 14.
I told Mr. Zwanenburg the other night, he brought me a great deal of consolation. Although our crewmate was killed, there's always that feeling you want to get them out. And we couldn't, and it was depressing. That was my main thought, actually, and I'm sure it was of the others, but we didn't speak of it.
But you were out in time.
Just about.
Well, I said I would give you something.
Well.
And this is one of the shells you shot.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I hope you like it, and
yes,
keep it as a memento.
I'll treasure this.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Mrs. Zwanenburg.
My pleasure.
One of the shells. I'm not crying, it's just this...
No, it's the wind, I understand that.
Well,
all right.
Say so.
Well, I should say I'll wrap it up again because
yes,
it's raining a little bit.
Yes, I'll treasure that.
The humane work of the Dutch Air Force continues as fragments of personal belongings and lost aircraft are sifted for identifying clues. Much of the equipment, such as this pilot seat, is intact and in remarkably good condition after years underwater.
Well, it doesn't surprise us anymore, and sometimes I would like that today's equipment would be as good as that. You see, this here is, well, a pre-war parachute hook. I just cleaned the mud up, and it's as shiny as ever. But just a very normal thing like a cable clamp. We got this from that B-24, and you see it still works. I mean, it has been under the water for some 30 years and still going. In that sterling, we found the oil and the prop gear because the feathering of the prop was done with oil pressure. And, well, as you see, it's still perfect. I had it analyzed in Britain, and they told me that it still stood up to the specification in 1943, and that after, well, she went in 1943 and recovered her in 1972, so it's remarkable, isn't it? Personal effects recognized by the family as have belonged to their fiancé, son, what's your name? For instance, here I have a watch. Well, no, you might say, why didn't you get that one back? But this was duty issue. This was not a personal one. But from the same person, we found his pilot's ring. And that one definitely went back because that was a personal thing. Here, sunglasses, which the normal type issued during the war. And I found those sunglasses together with those gloves. And, well, for me, that's an indication it's not just an aircraft, but man inside. One of the things I have to do is when we find an aircraft, and we know that people are missing, I have to look at those specific aircraft parts which are found in the neighborhood of a person. When we find this, it's a harness lock. This is carried on the man. They put on a harness when they get into the aircraft, and they only put it off when they come back to base. So when you find this particular thing, it's a 100% indication that you have to find a man as well. And when we find a man, one of my tasks is to see which bits and pieces of the aircraft are found with the man. For instance, this here is a rudder pedal of a Sterling, indicating that you're in a cockpit area.
Personal belongings of those who died so long ago are reverently removed. A comb, which might carry scratched initials. These overshoes a pilot once wore against the high-altitude cold. And perhaps inside this helmet being carefully washed could be the name of the wearer or his squadron. In a ceremony unique in the world, the Dutch of Dronten pay yearly tribute to air crews who died for their country's eventual liberation. The Dutch Air Force will find more wrecked aircraft in the archaeological mud once covered by water. More of those who died on duty will be named. The qualification implied by the word missing will end, and many people in many countries will have the knowledge they sought for so many years. Still sad,